I would like to welcome you to hand over the session to you, sir.
Okay.
Over to you, sir, for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Girish V.
Yes, sir.
And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Siddhappa Yam, who is a good friend of mine. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'd like to also thank Dr. Nandini CK and the entire organizing team at Government First Grade College, KR Nagar, including the principal and all the people who have been instrumental in conceptualizing as well as organizing this wonderful webinar, which is taking place on highly kind of pertinent topics, and you have been able to pull together very good kind of resource persons, and I'm very happy to kind of know the kind of overall proceedings of the entire this particular webinar. I'd like to seek the permission of the host to just share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation. So if I'm granted the permission, I could share the screen, the presentation. I'm getting the message as host as disabled persons screen sharing. Can I share my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can, sir.
Okay.
Sir, you can share it now.
Yeah, I'm trying to share it.
Yes. Okay, sir.
So how much time do I have, Dr. Siddhappa?
We have half an hour for you, sir.
Okay, so for the presentation, I can take about 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, sir. No, sir. After half an hour, you will get 10 minutes for question and answer, sir.
Okay.
13
Is
plus.
is the screen visible now?
No,
Is
sir.
my PowerPoint presentation not yet?
Not yet, sir. Not yet, sir.
Okay. Now, is it visible?
Yeah, sir. Now it is taking, sir. Now it is taking.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, sir.
Okay. So, I'd like to just once again thank the organizers and also welcome all the delegates of this national webinar. And has been already told to you, the topic that has been given to me by the organizers is unorganized sector crisis with special focus on migrant workers. So, as you know, this is a topic which is very pertinent, and this has been the single most most shocking in terms of the conscience of the nation, as well as especially the social work fraternity, because there is, I think, also a sense of a guilt and remorse in most of us, because we social work is a value-based profession, and we feel that many a time in such kind of a crisis, we are not able to reach out to the most vulnerable section of the society, which is the migrant workers. And that's where I think I am just trying to voice out some of the kind of angst as well as the kind of helplessness that we as social work fraternity in India is going through. And also taking stock of the things, I think at least now we have to think of, if not just as social workers, as part of the civil society, how exactly we can try to make sense of this crisis, and as citizens as well as people who are expected to forge a very formidable kind of a response to this kind of a crisis. I think I will try to voice out the concerns of the migrant workers, as well as what should be maybe think aloud on what should be or what could be some of the responses by the various actors, especially the social workers, as far as this crisis is concerned. So the flow of my presentation will be, first part will be on unorganized sector. I'd like to just state that we had exigency kind of a situation from which now entire unorganized sector has moved into what we now can term it as crisis situation. And it is not all of a sudden the crisis that has taken place. There was many kind of factors, historic as well as cultural factors, which were already there inherent. And second part, because my presentation will be focused on migrant workers. So migrant workers, as you know, in India for various reasons, were invisible. They did not get any media space. They did not get, even in social work curriculum, did not have much kind of space. And then because of the COVID-19, the crisis that all of us faced, because of they were on the streets, because of they were rushing to kind of, they were taking great risk in rushing to wherever the rumors led them to, be it the railway stations, be it to any kind of let's say any rumor of some vehicle or some kind of arrangement being made to take them, to ferry them back to their kind of villages or rural places from where they had come, or sometimes most of them directly by foot, trying to kind of walk miles together on our national highways. And so they became visible. And now, once again, slowly there is a danger of we, the civil society, going into great slumber. And once again, these kind of whatever images that we have had, whatever the kind of a crisis that we have seen, this yeah, sorry, I had some kind of connectivity issue. Am I audible now? Siddhappa, sir?
Yeah, sir. Okay, sir. You can go ahead, sir. Now we can.
I think screen sharing, is it continuing, or once again I need to share
Yeah,
my screen?
now you have to share once again, sir.
Very sorry. Okay, you have to give me the permission. Very sorry, there was some problem with the connectivity. I won't think it will be repeated. There should not be any problem for the rest of the remaining part of the presentation. Yeah, is it visible now?
Yeah, sir. You can go ahead, sir. Now.
And am I audible? Someone in the among the participants said, I think in the chat box there was a message that I'm not very audible. Am I quite audible, sir? Now?
Yeah, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, fine. Now I don't know where exactly the connection was disrupted. I was trying to just tell you the kind of the flow of the presentation. First part will be on unorganized sector. Second part will be on migrant workers at the focus of my kind of a presentation. And the third part is whether we can call this as a crisis or emergency. And fourth, not moving, just a minute. Yeah, fourth point will be, or part of the presentation will be on implications for social welfare state as citizens or part of the civil society. And the fifth part is what can we do, all of us as the actors in this democratic kind of setup, and especially as social workers or people, citizens who are concerned with this kind of a crisis or emergency kind of a situation as far as migrant workers is concerned. So I'd like to kind of put forth some kind of possibilities, especially in influencing the policy at various kind of levels. So I'd like to begin by the quotation or a particular statement made by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in his times regarding the working classes, how in India, because the crisis that has taken place, although it is because of the COVID-19, is also because of the impending kind of factors, the way overall the society or as a kind of polity, we will look at the unorganized sector in general and migrant workers issues in particular. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had a statement once regarding the working classes. According to him, the working classes, I quote, the working classes who are beggared in every way and who have very little to spare often sacrifice their all to the so-called cause of nationalism. The free independent nation state which emerges from a successful nationalism and which reared on their sacrifices turns to be the enemy of the working class under the hegemony of their masters. So we think what we have is a democracy where everyone, there is no one greater, no one lesser, all of us are equal and equal opportunity, access to opportunities and equal kind of treatment is meted out to all of us. But Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had already foreseen that unless there is real social democracy, this would be the fate of the working classes, especially in unorganized sectors, people in the unorganized sector and the migrant workers. That is the kind of almost kind of a prophecy which has come true because Dr. B.R. Ambedkar knew that although there is going to be a democratic regime, although there is going to be a kind of a very strong constitutional safeguards, still the elite or the so-called masters of this new kind of order, what is known as nation state, are going to somewhere dominate and be hegemonic over the working classes, and that's what we saw in our 3 or 4 months in the recent past. So the unorganized sector, as you know, taking the first part, the unorganized sector it has moved from exigency to crisis. You know that both these words, terms like exigency and crisis, are basically a part of the terminology that we use in disaster management, and it is the Disaster Management Act which is in force now, and this is a disaster-like situation. So exigency was there, a kind of a situation that was there already before COVID-19. That is my basic argument, that unorganized sector was invisible, unorganized sector was not given priority, and most of us did not bother, other than certain activists who tried to raise a voice on their behalf, like Haruna Roy and others. Most of us did not bother, even social workers, we never worked much with the unorganized sector. And there was an exigency kind of situation which has a potential to be converted into or turned into a crisis, and that's what we saw because of COVID-19, which acted as a trigger. So especially the lockdown. So the unorganized sector comprise more than 82% of the Indian workers, according to one estimate. Many of them are migrant workers, which is the focus of today's presentation. So their employment is not protected, hazardous, and low paid. Okay, so look at the entire kind of irony of the situation. So they are doing the most hazardous kind of a work, which no one wants to do, but they are paid the lowest, and they don't have employment security, and many times they are not covered under whatever the health and safety and welfare kind of measures, because they are not on the rolls of the kind of certain organizations. They are in the unorganized sector, and many times because of the lots of kind of unfair labor practices, although they deserve to get certain kind of benefits when they meet with certain accidents or some kind of exigencies, that is also not is denied to them. And they, because they are not organized, the very term unorganized says that they are not organized sufficiently, because of lack of education, lack of leadership, lack of the kind of proper trade unions making them members and all that. So because of these kind of conditions which are quite unfair to them, they are not able to get whatever is their due as far as certain social security legislations are concerned. So there are also, we should know that everything has a history and certain historical factors. Historic kind of factors are there, like our over the years, our society, especially having the divide, hierarchical kind of divide, where the caste, class, and gender-wise kind of person has given the most kind of vulnerable sections of the Dalits and the Adivasis and the women among all the kind of one, the kind of most hazardous kind of employment kind of one. But many times they were to historically also there is a history of what we call as in Karnataka, for example, even today, Bitti Chakri is practiced. This is a form of bonded labor, and this bonded labor and making people do the kind of what is called as filthy kind of work, employment, which no one wants to do. But it is supposed to be some sort of something called as their dharma. What is their dharma? Their Chaturvarna dharma. They supposed to be, they should be doing it almost like their kind of duty, and get some kind of recording to some people to what extent we can numb the consciousness of our entire nation is an example of this kind of statement, saying that in doing this Varnashram Dharma, doing the kind of menial jobs, carrying the kind of filter of the way, kind of waste of other people on their heads and all that, getting into the kind of manholes and cleaning up all our kind of whatever blockages that are caused because of not proper, improper functioning of the sewage system and all that. And there were some of us, so-called the upper caste or so-called the religious or spiritual leaders even today, say that only by doing this kind of a dharma, they are able to get the spiritual experience, so that they maybe in the next birth, rebirth, they will be born in a superior caste or class or whatever. And this is the kind of historic, because of the religious and other kind of sociological and cultural factors, that we are many times our conscience is not at all awakened. We don't think of it as a value crisis. We don't think of it as a kind of shameful kind of activity or incidents that are taking place in the kind of nation, that the people who are building our houses, people who are taking care of our kitchens and our restaurants and our streets and our kind of entire civilization are given the least priority and the least employment and the least kind of security, and not even given a dignified opportunity for a dignified death. So this is, we don't realize that this is such a shameful thing not to be kind of taking care of some, despite spending, having gone through so many years of experiments of with our independence and what we call as nation's welfare state. So the unorganized sector, which had moved from exigency mode due to the processes of LPG, which are already kind of dilution. There was lots of dilution of the labor laws, and even the judgments in the courts were against the unorganized sector. They were not favoring them. And also, although they were there, the so-called HR professionals and all the kind of so-called management experts and gurus, they somewhere had the strategies in place to see to it that these people were kept in perpetual kind of uncertainty, and no minimum wages were paid, and they were all the time they would come out with various kind of strategies that very often same people would be continued, but with some kind of discontinuity in their service and things of that sort. The most skilled personnel, most important persons among them also were kept in such a kind of status, and just because they were from the rural areas, they were from the lower rung of the society and the societal hierarchy that we had in place already. So now, because of the COVID-19 lockdown situation, they were thrown into a crisis condition, the entire unorganized sector, and especially among them, the migrant workers, they were invisible. because of the middle class mentality, because of our so-called kind of varnashram dharma and the caste system and the overall kind of mindset that we had, and the media's kind of preferential kind of treatment as far as rural and urban issues are concerned, or the poor and the richer one. So because of various kind of even syllabus or curriculum, they were really visible. Now because of this one, all of a sudden, most of us spend lots of time in front of the television sets and the social media also. Lots of pictures of these people running from pillar to post and walking miles together, and all those things were somewhere they became visible because it was the kind of uncontainable as far as even the kind of police force was concerned. And now once again, slowly we think that it is a new normal now, and so it is only a natural that we will very soon there is a danger of forgetting the entire concern. So even now, even during the crisis, it was not their faces which were much visible. They did not hear many of their voices. They were not interviewed sufficiently. Their perspectives were not represented sufficiently. It is the perspective of the middle class. It is the perspective of the media. It was the perspective of the kind of overall the elites, which spoke in favor of them even through media and other things. And we had, of course, songs and all that with their images. So at least their feet got some media coverage. So we know that they are the backbone of Indian urban economy, be it our kitchens, be it our drainage systems, be it our trains, be it our whatever, cannot be thought of without the migrant workers' labor. So they have always been the most ignored and forgotten segment, despite being the backbone. They have been, because of the historical, socio-cultural factors that I have hinted at, most kind of ignored and forgotten segment of the society, despite building our homes and skyscrapers, and making them functional. So they have been living in the keris. This is the Kannada term, Uru Keri, we call them. So in Uru, only the kind of the dominant caste, the so-called upper caste live, and in keris, whether someone dies, whether whatever crisis takes place, no one bothers. Uru, people in the Uru, that is the village proper, never bothered. Tandas, that is where another community which is categorized as scheduled caste in Karnataka. The Lamanis live separately, and Hadi is where most of the tribal communities live. So they have been living there, being invisible, their concerns not being addressed at all. So living in slums, and when it comes to the urban centers, they live on slums and roadsides, and no one bothers. Every day we pass by them. We never bother to even stop and look at them. So brought some visibility now because of the lockdown, COVID-19 situation, visibility and media space due to the crisis caused by less than 4 hours notice, which is remained a mystery. Why? What was the kind of requirement without doing any kind of anticipatory analysis of the lockdown? Because it was obvious that this will be the kind of most hit segment of the society, the migrant workers. But no thought was given to their kind of son. It was only the middle class and the rich whose concerns were taken care. Otherwise, there is no logic in such a short notice kind of son. No kind of arrangement was made to see to it that even Janata curfew, which was supposed to be voluntary, was made almost kind of a forced kind of a curfew, a real curfew kind of a situation by cancelling all the trains and transportation and things of that sort. So this is the kind of a priority that our entire elites and the middle class and the policymakers have as far as the migrant workers is concerned. So they are not at all visible to them. They never appear in their kind of planning schedule. So in all likelihood, their issues and importance will be forgotten once again, as I told you, because we will go back to our normal kind of it is the elites and the kind of so-called educated and organized sector which will take precedence over the unorganized sector. And as far as to give you a little more picture, you know that some of you might be already knowing just now what is available to us as far as census data is concerned. Latest data is of 2011. So total number of internal migrants is 45.36 crores, that is in 2011. And that was almost 37% of the country's population. So they comprise more than 33% of the country's total workforce. And study conducted by CSBS and Azim Premji University in 2019 revealed that more than 29% of the migrants are the daily wage earners, and most of them work in construction industry, which once again has lots of hazardous kind of working conditions and not very kind of regulated work environment as well as employment protection. So most of their monthly household income is less than rupees 5,000 entire household's income. So even though from they migrate, you can understand it is not because of many a time now some people because of these people going back to villages. They said that okay, these people had left their fields barren and they were attracted by these kind of luxuries and the limelight they would get, or the kind of some kind of city kind of a life that attracted them. That was not the case. It is, if you look at the earning, more than 50% of them earned, the entire households earned less than rupees 5,000 per month. That very clearly shows that it is a rural distress that pushed them out of the villages, and it was a kind of choice between two kind of evils that they had to make, lesser evil they had to choose. So three important traits of the migrant workers: internal migration, that is the internal migration within the state. It may be interstate within the kind of country. It may be interstate or intrastate. So most of the people who migrate to other kind of states are from UP, Bihar, MP, and Rajasthan. So second kind of a trait or a feature or characteristic of migrants in India is the informality. So there is no contracts, no signed, there is no kind of guarantee of their kind of continuity and things of that sort. Anytime they may be taken into job, anytime most of them have to look for job on everyday basis. And circularity, that is not that they are relocated totally to the urban kind of centers where they are looking for employment or livelihood. They have their roots, they have their kind of organic kind of relationship with their communities back home in the villages. So that's a kind of circularity. Most of them are seasonal migrants, and this is the kind of overall composition of the migrant workers as far as migrant workers in India is concerned. So whether it can be called as crisis or emergency kind of situation, I would strongly argue that we should use the word emergency and not crisis because of the following kind of reasons. One is, it is a crisis for all of us, that middle class, lower middle class is suffering. But when it comes to the unorganized sector, we should know that it is an emergency kind of a situation. So emergency for migrant workers. So because we have the double standards, because the historical and social cultural reasons that I said, they are totally invisible. Their priorities are no priorities for us. So special aeroplanes, for example, were sent for the migrants, immigrants. Immigrants are especially those who are living outside the countries. That's why I use the word immigrants to refer to them. So the students, the wealthy kind of classes which are living outside India, special aeroplanes were kind of arranged. But when it comes to the migrant workers, even after first, second, or third phase, many times trains were cancelled, buses were cancelled due to the lobby of the real estate and the construction builders and others, the so-called elites. The factors that created the emergence was patriarchal mindset. So many times we should not look at the superficial kind of reasons that they were feeling homesick, that somewhere they somewhere felt that okay, they had made a mistake by coming out of the kind of villages. No, I think it is mainly because of the overall environment that was there and is there in the entire our country. But the patriarchal kind of mindset, although we have democracy, there is no room for patriarchy or feudal kind of mindset. So still we have this kind of patriarchal mindset, feudal mindset, where we look at these people as only kind of subjects and the kind of certain objects and not as subjects or people with certain agency. So class discrimination, caste burden, most of these, people come from drawn from lower rung of the society, caste-based society, and the class and caste in India, as many kind of studies show, are kind of linked, and bureaucratic domination. So there is some kind of for everything. For example, if a train facility was arranged, once again they were supposed to go and register themselves. They were supposed to stand for certain queues for buying, filling of the forms, and once again they had to get the fitness certificate and so many things. So this is a bureaucratic approach in this, even this, in this kind of emergency kind of situation. Their life was not made easy even when granting them some kind of relief by way of allowing them to go back to their villages. So communal divide, once again, most of these people are also, when it comes to predominantly, it is the Muslim kind of population of that. So although all of them are kind of in the organized sector, all of them are migrant workers, because of the kind of communal element that was brought in time and again. They themselves were divided. They were already unorganized. They became more unorganized due to this. So media menace. So media was trying to somewhere create so much of confusion, and media was not very fair to them, and trying to bring some kind of experts, and they were trying to have they were airing certain opinions which were in favor of the elites or in favor of the policymakers, rather than really mixing some investigative kind of journalism and trying to see to it that their issues were put in the forefront. And there was also partisan view of the courts. For example, courts gave quick kind of hearing and judgment to so many kind of issues during that lockdown period. But when it came to these people, then when so many PILs and other concerns, no fair kind of some, only in the second half maybe courts were a little more because of the articles and other kind of social media, the kind of reaction that was there. They were forced maybe, or certain only some judges were a little more humane. But initially they said if they want to walk to their rural kind of their native places, then no one can stop. So what is the issue, big issue, kind of that kind of statements were made by even by the courts, including the Supreme Court, the apex court. So they were stranded in chawls and roadsides, and they were expected to maintain social distance. You can imagine in a room of 10 by 10, almost in slums and so on, 10 to 12 people live there. And all of a sudden you announce lockdown and expect them to maintain social distance, then there will be greater kind of irony and illogical thing than that. And other forms of, so many times they were infested with the or infected with this virus just because they were not allowed to move early enough. And only once they were affected by this virus, they were allowed to go back to their villages and spread to their loved ones in their back home in their native places. So it was very unfair to expect them to. So that's why I call it, say that this is not an ordinary crisis kind of a situation. It is more of an emergency which was thrust upon this category of people. So threat of the virus was much more to them than to any of us because of these kind of unhygienic and very kind of unfair living conditions that they had to put up with. So their wages were not paid, and no action was taken as far as the local governance or immigration is concerned. That was not an issue at all for us, because we thought that government is anyway giving them food and water and other kind of stuff, or NGOs are doing that humanitarian. So what about their justice for the work that was done? No one really bothered to give them justice, render their justice. So many of them were and are sickly and malnourished because they are basically working class, which are earning very little and have been living in very unhygienic working and living spaces. So some of them are dependent on substances, because you know that to work in such unhygienic conditions, sometimes they have to, or sometimes to kind of beat their hunger and other things. Some of them were dependent on substances. And you can imagine when it comes to gender issues, if a husband in a 10 by 10 room is locked up there with the wife and daughters and all that, and is on substance and it doesn't get this one, whatever, whether alcohol or let's say other kind of drugs or whatever, or ganja or whatever substances that they were dependent upon, then you can imagine there, first of all, that individual's kind of agony and angst and medical condition. And also because of that person being a male, in case he was a male, then the possibility of the violence that he would have meted out to his own loved ones. So there was shortage of food and water. All these things were there. Lack of sensitivity while distributing essentials, NGOs and so on. For example, here itself in Karnataka, for those people from Yadgiri or Raichur, rice was distributed from the temples. That too, here the other most of the Shudra, so-called Shudra communities, people belong to Shudra communities, eat boiled rice, but only the so-called upper caste people eat the kind of raw rice, and that kind of rice, people from this part, the Dakshina Kannada district itself, find it difficult to eat, and for day in and day out together, they were made to eat such kind of a food which is not at all part of their food system. And while distributing food also, they were not treated with dignity. They were always clicking photographs, and more of publicity stunts were carried out by some of the people, not everyone. But there was, I think, overall everyone lacked the kind of sensitivity, the basic principle of social work, recognizing the worth and dignity of these individuals was violated. So there were also lots of police brutality. So police, because their intention was good, but because of the kind of colonial kind of mindset that they still carry, they use the sanitized lathis to kind of beat up these migrant workers. And there was loss of livelihood. Many of them, about 60% of them, I don't think can go back to their kind of whatever sources of livelihood that were there. The sense of alienation, they were feeling terribly kind of let down. They were feeling totally kind of unwanted by everyone and all that. Because you know that migrant workers, especially the poorer people in this country, the poor people are the most self-respecting people that I have ever seen. Those people who have worked at the grassroots level, have interacted, will know. It is not the rich, it is not the middle class, it is the poorest of the poor who have the highest sense of dignity and self-respect. And when that is hurt, because they earn their living, they by their sweat and their hard work, they earn every day. So that is the kind of sense of ethics that they have, right? A kind of sense of ethics, and that was violated. They had to beg, they had to plead, and there was no one to hear. You want to give them an opportunity to go back to their native places. So there was struggle for survival, which is still continuing. So it was not for saving their livelihoods. We all of us struggled to save our livelihoods or employment and all that. But for them, survival itself was at stake. So they thought, anyway, we are going to die. So let us go back to our native places so that at least we get a dignified burial. We can die peacefully in front of. There is nothing called a peaceful death, of course, but that is what would have attracted them. That was what would have both survival instinct and a desire for dignified burial would have made them walk miles together without having the energy, without having any kind of food, and that would have been the sole motivation. So stress, and we speak of whenever in our webinars and so on, we speak of stress only of the middle class, and somewhere these people are not very much discussed. So, but these people, because they have high sense of dignity and self-respect, they have gone through stress, they have gone through anxiety and depression. We think of these people as always having high kind of capacity for resilience and things of that sort. We should come out of these biases and understand that these people also, because of very greatest threat that was there for their survival and dignified burial, that they have gone through untold kind of stress and anxiety and depression. So economic and humanitarian catastrophe has got precedence over a health catastrophe. So health was a major kind of concern for us, but for them it was a humanitarian kind of a catastrophe. So issue of food distribution also, lots of food was getting rotten, and there was a center and the kind of states were kind of bargaining because the states wanted food to be given by the center free of cost, but the center wanted them almost rupees 20 to be paid for a kilogram of rice, which was almost equal to the market price. And when these people were going hungry, there was this kind of tussle going between the center and the state, and the food which was already rotting for years together in our government godowns was we were finding it difficult to distribute, and many of these people didn't even have valid ration cards or even kind of proof to show that they have applied for ration cards. So, what are the implications for the welfare state? One is every modern nation state, you should know that by its very definition, so if someone earlier in monarchy or earlier kind of totalitarian kind of systems, welfare was not the defining kind of, so only the protection of the citizens was the kind of, but now by very definition, it is the duty of the governments to give the livelihoods, to give the take care of other kind of, so that's why it is not an option for whether the civil society or the government. We have to be a welfare state, and the poorest of the poor, especially the migrant workers, have to be taken care of. Have to be taken care of. So rights and entitlements are the basic defining kind of features. And but what has happened is what we call as democracy, if you understand it properly, is still the kind of has many reminiscences of the feudal, patriarchal, and caste-based kind of society. And the brunt is borne by whom we call as the migrant workers in general. So they are seen as only the voters to be bought, but it is a kind of the elites, the entrepreneurs who are capitalists, who are still influencing the policy. They are the ones who have understood how the other kind of perfected the art of winning elections without kind of really bothering about the issues of these unorganized sector in general and migrant workers in particular. So while framing policies, they are seen more as hands that toil and mouths that eat, rather than as people with their own mind and their heart and their ideas and their creativity. And many of them are actually scientists. Many of them are they develop their own indigenous technology, but none of it. They are very creative, very kind of because of their kind of creativity and their application of mind and their kind of risk-taking ability, their kind of hard work, that our civilization is able to survive and thrive. But still, we have not realized it. So disasters generally simply uncover the inequities of poverty which were already present before the crisis, and that's what we saw. So poorer households with less education and fewer job skills encounter most difficulty in extracting the resources from the state and the civil society organization. Similarly, communities with low human capital which suffer from crime and drug abuse may find it difficult to mobilize the resources into rebuilding. And this is what the modern nation state should know. Our governments and policymakers and civil society actors should know that they should be the top priority as far as our policies are concerned. So the rights of the people, like the life and security, the right to adequate standard of living, the right to physical and mental health, the right to education, the right not to be submitted to forced labor, the right not to be subject to torture, the right to freedom of association. All these rights have been violated to some degree or the other in the entire episode. So what should be the way forward, the last part of my presentation? This is first greatest challenge is to the way we look at the migrant workers, our mindset, especially the middle class mindset or the elites mindset. So this is the kind of a cartoon that that was circulating, getting circulated in the social media. We think that they are getting everything because of taxpayers' money. The poor people are getting everything, and the PL persons, they're having all the facilities at our kind of, and those are above poverty line are suffering the most. Can you think of more ridiculous and more insensitive kind of a thinking than this? And many people circulate it, thinking most of the middle class people circulate this without understanding that this is the most unfair kind of statement or unfair kind of thinking thought process. So how can social workers, so how can we change, first of all, our own mindset, and how can we change the mentality of others how can we bring about real social development in this country. So PDS, public distribution system without demanding ration cards, should be thought of. This should be some of my suggestions, which for which we have to do lobbying and advocacy work. So we cannot think of only case work, group work, and all that, and only community development. We should get into social action mode. We have to get together with the lawyers. We should get together with the other civil society actors and try to see to it that some of these demands are met or these things are prioritized. So local community kitchens, just as we have midday meals, already things are there in some. So local community kitchens for those people who have come back from cities, migrant workers, that should be thought of. We have to expand the employment guarantee scheme. Already it is being done as far as Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme is concerned. But we have to augment it. We have to strengthen further because especially in this monsoon, now people are not going to know. Everyone doesn't have land or sufficient kind of a land. So even if they have land till they cultivate and get their kind of crops, they have to be taken care of by expanding the employment guarantee schemes that are there. Strengthen public healthcare system as Sri Lanka and Thailand. I have taken the example of Sri Lanka and Thailand. They are comparable with us. Many times we cannot compare ourselves with countries in Europe and United States. So these are the comparable countries. Our expenditure is lowest, and the private kind of hospitals have been making profit. So we cannot expect migrant workers, the most vulnerable, even to the COVID-19 kind of situation, to get access and affordability as far as these private hospitals is concerned. So invest in the human resources in the rural areas. The poor, the migrant workers are the most talented, most hardworking, but just because of lack of proper working and living conditions, and due to lack of proper nourishment, that they are not able to earn. But they can be trained very well. They, despite not having very good kind of education and literacy rate and all that, they are highly skilled, highly kind of having in their very culture, in their very civilization, they have these kind of traits. So they have to be kind of trained for better reasons so that they can get skilled employment. They should be kind of guaranteed minimum wages and higher kind of. We should see to it that there is some kind of better shift for the better as far as our policies is concerned, and they should be seen as human resources who can be trained and utilized, and also can be given higher wages or salaries. And direct cash and goods transfers should be continued, and communities should be prioritized over the government. Now what is happening is it is becoming more and more centralized, where government decides what is good for the people. Now, as communities means, especially the community of the migrant workers, their voice has to be heard more and more. We have to widen and deepen social democracy, and model of social democracy has to be promoted. I will just skim through all these kind of points, and only if someone is interested in during the question answer session, I will address kind of try to clarify if someone wants me to clarify some of these points. So, and NGOs need to be reorganized as only one, albeit important actors in civil society, and we should not think that NGO is civil society and civil society are. There are trade unions, there are CBOs, there are kind of so migrant workers, they have basically CBOs, and we have to think of at least organizing them now as CBOs, and their network should be kind of used, not just NGOs speaking on behalf of these migrant workers. So networks through which low-income communities themselves can engage in dialogue and negotiations should be kind of promoted. So no one else should speak on behalf of them, but we have to try to create networks among the migrant workers themselves, their experiences, their kind of insights, their kind of how to be ventilated properly. They has to be kind of properly channelized so that at least in the future they don't once again go back into the invisible kind of world that they had come from, but remain very relevant, and their experiences continue to guide the policy making for the future. So special schemes for the elderly, among them, once again, elderly, widows, disabled, their interests have to be taken care of. So there should be change in the economic and political order, which is a long kind of discussion, and advocacy also should be
Sir.
Hello. So I think sir having little difficult in network, I think. Can you just wait for a few minutes?
I think sir was concluding. Um, but Siddhapa sir, can you just check with him?
Yeah, okay, madam, I'll do it. I'll do it. Giri sir, can you hear me?
Sir?
Yeah,
Sir.
yeah, sir is requesting go ahead with next session, sir.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
I thank Ashok sir for elaborating about unorganized sector, and he has given multiple dimensions, prospects about issue of unorganized sector. So now quickly we will move on to our next speaker, Miss Carolyn Chang, ma'am. Ma'am, before handing over to you, we would like to congratulate you for awarding the doctoral degree very soon. And sorry for the delay because we had some technical issues in the beginning. So now I would request Shankar sir to introduce Carolyn madam to the delegates. Over to you, Shankar sir.
DSSW degree in the Social Work Department, University of Dakota, USA. She has completed her doctoral degree work at Queen Margaret University, UK, and waiting for her PhD award. Prior to her moving to the US, she studied English literature and psychology at the University of Hong Kong and obtained a postgraduate certificate in education as well and was into school teaching for a brief period. She has worked as a researcher, practitioner, and educator and has ample experiences working in Hong Kong, India, UK, and the US. Some of the positions she held include a senior researcher associate in the City University of Hong Kong, child advocate in the Minnesota Judicial Branch, teaching assistant in the University of Edinburgh, and guest lecturer and research in Lucknow University, India. Currently, she is working on research projects which are collaborating with international scholars and experts on human rights advocacy for political asylum seekers in London, Toronto, and Philadelphia, child trafficking in the border of Nepal and India, and exploring creative ways to disseminate research findings, such as using animated videos to reach a wider audience online. Today, Madam will be speaking on the topic building social capital to support migrant workers in crisis. We are very glad to have you in this program, Madam. On behalf of GFTC Care Nagar, I extend a warm welcome to you, Madam. Thank you. Over to you, Sir Girish. Girish, sir.
Thank you, Shankar sir, for introducing ma'am. And I would request ma'am to hand over, start the presentation, ma'am. Over to you, Carolyn, ma'am.
Okay, so thank you very much for the very nice introduction. And so I can go ahead and share my screen, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful webinar. So the topic today is building social capital to support migrant workers in crisis. I'm very glad that the previous professor has already laid out quite a lot of the issues about migrants in these pandemics. And since he has much more knowledge of the India settings, and for me, I would more focus on a more micro level, how social workers, how practitioners can make use of our skills to go to the field and help migrant workers' urgent needs. And I would also talk about two very important conceptual framework that I have used in my doctoral research studies. And I hope you can also make use of those framework when you go out to apply these theories into practice. I think I will just go through these few slides really quickly because Professor already have given a lot of details, who the migrants are and the percentage of migrants working in India, and also the obstacles, struggles, and emergent, the emergency and crisis that they are facing at this point of time.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Sorry for the interruption. We are not able to see your PPT.
Oh. Let me see. I am looking at the screen right now and it is sharing. So.
Oh, okay. Siddhapa sir.
Okay, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Can you just, Caroline madam, can you just switch this thing, your PPT on? So I cannot help this in this regard.
Maybe I can try to share again.
Yeah, please do it, ma'am. Do it.
Yeah.
Now it is okay. Now it is okay.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
Right, yeah. So as I said, I'm not going to repeat too much about who the migrants are in India and the obstacles, since Professor has already mentioned that. And I think all these crises and difficulties, challenges are not only local issues. When you look at other parts of the world, most people are facing very similar issues. Of course, not to that extent, probably. I can share some of the local examples. For example, my students have to leave campus, leave where we are at the moment, and went back home during this lockdown. So they also face a lot of problems when they reach home. For example, some of them lost their jobs where they were working on campus in the town when they were studying here, and they lost their own space. By the time they went home, they have to start helping with the families, get some local jobs, and also support the families financially, for example. And I was told that their stress level has suddenly become threefold. And other issues like children's education, like worldwide, you see all the schools were closed and students, especially young children, lost their friends and become stuck at home. And they cannot even go out to the playground or go in the neighborhood to play. And we all see increased domestic abuse and violence during this lockdown. And of course, it will lead to mental health issues because of all kinds of problems suddenly become all at once. And isolation definitely is one important factor that contributes to mental health, like anxiety and depression. So next, I will focus mainly on two concepts, the social capital as well as well-being. Why I link these two concepts is because when you look at well-being research, I would say most of them will mention that social relationship stands out as the #1 factor that impact people's happiness. So when we talk about dealing with crisis, dealing with day-to-day lives struggles, what we could look at, the most urgent factor is how we can enhance the social capital, particularly when we talk about social connections. What I meant social connections here are the human capital, the human relationships that people have in their daily lives, the network that they can draw on, the support that they can rely on. The three main concepts under social capital, more specifically social connections, that I would refer to in this presentation are bonds, bridges, and links. I will explain it briefly what they are. So when we talk about bonding capital, it's mainly the person that look like you, like people live in your household, people in your neighborhood, that you can easily find similarities with. And then when we talk about bridging capital, is someone that is a bit more different than you and your family. For example, when you go out to a community centers, go to the libraries, go to a youth center, then you meet people from your community that might be of a different ethnicities, different educational background, or different careers. And this kind of capital actually, according to social capital theory, can help us to get more resources and link to capital that are of more higher hierarchy. And usually, the more the bonds you have, the more bridging opportunities you have. And finally, the linking capital is to link you with a more, the highest, I would say, possible hierarchy. For example, government officials, departments like health departments, social welfare departments that can support you, of a more macro level needs. So the most influential theorist will be Putnam. And it is him who promote that social bonds promote a better relationship. And in his theory, the legwork is very important, and it generates trust as well as reciprocity. And if these two factors are there, for example, a trusting relationship plus the opportunity to give help rather than just receiving help, these two factors will help reinforcing the bonding relationship plus the social connections. So for practitioners and social work students, when you work in the field, I'm sure most of you will agree that you need to have a trusting relationship with your clients, with the population that you work with. And when you try to involve them in the process of help, if you try giving them an opportunity to help you back, that you will reinforce and strengthen the relationship. And not only boosting their self-esteem, but in the long run, it will help them. It is what I would say, a strength-based and empowerment approach. So according to Putnam, more bonds will lead to more bridging capital. And then another theorist, Bourdieu, his idea is a little bit different than Putnam, but we can definitely draw on his theory in these pandemics to help and to understand why migrants might face more obstacles and challenges. From Bourdieu's point of view, where the person at the moment are very important. For example, how much skills and education the person have, what kind of jobs they have, becomes very important when we talk about mobilizing capital. When you look at the migrants' situation, they have limited human capital, limited skills, and they are having jobs that pay them on a daily basis. And all this will work against them during these pandemics. And please let me know if you cannot hear clearly as well. And then another conceptual framework by Acker and Strand in 2008. Those are my PhD supervisors. And this model talk about the integration framework in the refugees setting. I think the purpose of sharing this framework is to help students and practitioners working with the different kinds of population. All these can serve as an indicators to help check whether the people you work with have any issues with these domains. And of course, today we are focusing on the second domain, social connection. But I would encourage students to feel free to use this, especially for the migrants population, internal migrants or foreign migrants, because this is what they are dealing with employment, housing, maybe the children's education, their own education, health issues become a big concern when they move to a different place. And then language, cultural differences, and whether they feel safe or not. And eventually, the rights and citizenship, will they get the rights as other people in a new place? So the focus here will be why we talk about social connections and what are the impacts on migrants. When they move to a new place, the legwork of social bonds immediately help them to rebuild a new life. For example, making new friends, knowing what is there in the community, like social workers, support workers, case workers, in different settings, in hospitals, in schools, in the libraries. And all this can provide them very important information, I would say accurate information. For example, in my research, that I noticed migrants, refugees, they receive inaccurate information. So it would be detrimental to their lives in for example, the UK, where they move from different parts of the world, because information serve as the first point of contact for them. So knowing what is legal, what is illegal, where to get food, where to buy bus tickets, everything are crucial to their daily lives. And then emotional support, when they meet new friends, help one another, finding jobs, even looking after children when they have to go on a job interview, for example. And then another very crucial factor of having these social bonds are to maintain cultural ties. For example, they will meet people that come from the same place. Usually they gather together and form a subgroup because they share their ethnic language, they share the traditions, customs, food, and festivals. So that is a great help to their mental health as well. And of course, now when you translate all this into the pandemics, how can we continue to support the workers, the migrants, to continue this network during lockdown is the key, I would say, that we can open it up for discussion. And this is the last framework I will share with you is the well-being in developing countries model. I would think it is also very relevant to the Indian context. So for this model, it is a very complicated model, but when you look at it in a holistic way, it is easy to remember there are three aspects of it. The subjective is right at the top of the triangular 3D dimension here. And at the bottom is the material and the human capital. So the subjective is right at the top because it is very important that before we help any individuals, families, or the community, we have to know what are the subjective perspectives of their needs. Of course, we have some assumptions, like what we have been going through so far, all these struggles, financial struggles, health issues, mental health issues, that we assume that everyone is dealing with. But during the helping process, it's very important that we identify what are their needs, especially prioritizing their needs. And that will also help us to how we can prioritize the helping. Maybe mental health is the number one need for that family, or maybe food. So we need to know the priorities. And then to address the material needs as well as the human needs. So the social capital here binds everything and it intersects in all different aspects. So this is the model from Sarah White from the University of Bath in the UK, for those who want to check it out. And I just want to share one slide of my research. And this is something that social workers can do in the field. If you cannot see the people face to face, you can also use telephone or the internet. If they have internet, you can use email to interview them and try to understand how much support they have. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce this very briefly. So this is the household. It can be individuals and families that you are working with. Okay, so you can put whoever live in the household here in the first layer. And then when we move out of the household area, okay, that will be, for example, the village, the neighborhood that people live in. And then when the people you work with talk about, okay, a shop nearby is my support, then you can put shops here. If you know the name of the person, of the shop owner, you can also put down the names here. And then, etc. This is the city. For example, the city of Delhi. Okay, and then you extend it to the whole India, whether the population that you work with have any support. Okay, and then overseas. For migrant workers, international migrant workers, that probably will be their hometown. So if they are from China, if they are from Sri Lanka, so you put their support overseas on the other end. Okay. So why we create these social maps? When you work with the populations, social map like this can give you a very clear idea their social connections, whether it's a lot or very minimal. And it can help you to link them with whatever they do not have on the map. Okay, so it comes to the last part of my presentation. After we know of their needs, their priorities, how are we going to support the people in your community? So my questions to the floor will be, how are we going to build the social capital, especially the connections during this pandemic? How can we continue to facilitate some new connections and relationship? For example, as I mentioned earlier, when the migrants move back to their home, that maybe they used to see only once a year, twice a year, Now they're going to be in the same household with limited space 24/7. How are we going to help them to make use of this time to start some new relationship? So of course, as I said, providing access to accurate information is very important. So when you cannot go to people's home, what can we do? What can we do to pass on this information, provide practical help, like if they need help to take care of the children, for example, or emotional support? What will be some other alternatives to our usual way of doing things? For example, going for a home visit or hosting a community gathering in a village, for example. Yeah, so as I point out, the means to reach the clients, the migrants, are very important. So I would recommend the use of technology. So where I am at right now is in the United States, in the state of Michigan. So all the work that I'm doing shift from face-to-face to online platform as what we are doing right now. So I teach students over Zoom. We host webinars, presentations, everything basically right now are online. And another way of thinking, reaching a wider audience, I would say probably would be TV and radio broadcast. And I am guessing that part of India are using that already to reach out students, to reach out a mass population in giving information, especially the COVID-19, to keep the population up to date about what happened at the moment. Another possibilities will be identify some key persons in certain villages to spread the message in different communities. So I would say social workers, caseworkers normally will have some good relationship with key informants. So this is the time to make use of your relationship and reach out to those key informants, because they are the people that can help you spread your message across. Besides, you can utilize leaflets in the community. Print out some information maybe once a week and put it on a notice board in a village, or if you have the resources, utilize some people, social workers or students, and you can put the leaflets to like give it to each household. And lastly, I want to talk about promoting community resilience. This is the time that we need to draw people together rather than dividing people, which a lot of places where I am at right now, the United States, actually the government is doing, is to divide people, which will do quite a lot of harm to us rather than good. So I would say promoting community resilience, put people together and brainstorm ideas locally, regionally, put all the resources together to get through this crisis. As you can see, like, I'm sure if you are aware of the news that Black Lives Matters is all over the world, which started in the United States because of the African American communities are mainly unproportionally targeted as victims of this COVID-19. So it spreads a lot of, I would say, very unjust and inequity issues exposed to the surface. So of course, we have to deal with this crisis. Social movement usually comes when there are crises. But as I am going to end this presentation, crisis can also turn into opportunities. And don't let this drag us down. And as a social work professional and educators, I would encourage everyone to rise up and look at the opportunities here. And maybe in a year or two, when we look back, we can reflect on and find some new models to work with when the next crisis comes. So thank you very much for inviting me again, and I would welcome questions and engage in dialogues if students have any questions. Thank you.
Hello. Siddhappa sir?
Sir.
Can you, am I
Yeah.
audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, ma'am, for that elaborated presentation on enlightening us about building social capital towards migrant workers. And we have got international perspective on migrant workers and various aspects and prospects of it. So now we would like to welcome questions, and we have very less time. I think sir or ma'am, if there are any questions, I think we can take it.
Yes, sir. We have a few questions.
Yeah.
Ashok sir, are you here?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you able to hear me, madam?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
we are able to hear you.
Yeah, yeah.
We are not able to see you.
Okay.
You read out more questions.
Yes, I will read out the questions.
Yes,
So
madam.
the first one is, it's an anonymous person. He wants to know how to control unemployment problems and village people migrating.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, that's what he meant.
Yeah. Now, because of the globalization and other issues, unemployment, even for the so-called skilled and educated people, it's an issue. So even I think economists are finding it very challenging kind of one. But when it comes to just because our country has so much of infrastructural and other kind of needs and the urban kind of setting, as well as even when it comes to agriculture and other things, lots of things can be done. And that's where I think when it comes to those people who want to look for employment, continued kind of employment, the rural kind of one, we have to see to it that those minimum wages and other kind of also are taken care of, which is not done. There is, when it comes to legislation and all that, there are kind of very progressive legislations. But then now you see that taking this opportunity itself in UP and other places, even for organized kind of sector, when it comes to contract laborers and other kind of one, it is all they have made it easy for the employers to kind of one. So I think there are no easy kind of solutions, but then we have to see to it that we invest heavily on developing the human resources of the migrant workers also, not just concentrate on the educated classes or the kind of one. So there are no easy solutions, but I think lots of investment has to be done among the migrant workers, which is the poorest of the poorer section of the society, so that at least we can try to somewhere gainful employment can be continued. And even rural areas, we have to try to see to it that we do their skill mapping and try to see what new projects can be taken up in the one. What Abdul Kalam's that Pura kind of one, providing urban kind of amenities in the rural kind of one, that still remains kind of a distant kind of a dream. So I don't have any concrete suggestions as such, but I think it is for the policymakers to take a call. Yeah.
I think we can take one or two questions.
Yes, I was just looking if I can look for alternate questions to ma'am and sir, but in the let me just tell the participants, those who are participating through YouTube can post their queries there. I will read it out. So how to rebuild migrant laborers' lives? Like maybe it is something which both the resource people can throw light on. That's one of the questions. I'm randomly picking it.
I think this probably will be temporary, like because I cannot really speak of in the Indian context. Like in the United States, we are in different states. They have these phases start opening up the economy. So I would say migrants will go back to their work gradually, but in the meantime, of course, their lives will be disrupted. So in different parts of the world, we can all see that the government has to help. Like I would say Canada is giving 4 months of wages to support the workers who lost their jobs. Like here, so far, we only have one time from the government supporting people who lost their job. And they're talking about giving another round of stimulus money to help people to go through that. And before migrants can get back to work, and if the government is not there to provide for the people who are struggling with their lives, I would say as a social worker, we need to come up with resources and mobilize our own resources at the local level. Like even in some parts of the United States, I have seen people doing neighborhood fundraising, neighborhood donations, and then they put all the food and stuff together and then let people who need support to come and just pick whatever. So that can be something that we can organize as social workers, as a group.
Sir, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. I think that is a balanced kind of approach we can think of right now. That is, once again, since they are already many of them in the rural areas, I think there once again we'll have to look at employment generation kind of schemes to be expanded, and also somewhere neighborhood community development kind of schemes have to be concentrated more on entrepreneurial kind of initiatives. And when it comes to the urban, because we know that even today in the rural areas, the social and other economic kind of environment is not very conducive. Sooner or later, once again, they will come back to the urban centers looking for due to the rural distress. Then instead of going back to the same kind of old kind of practices, we need to think of investing more on the human resource, because these people are basically the very kind of full of resilience and very versatile. But I think we need to give them a better bargaining kind of a power, more kind of collaborative approaches should be thought of. But fiscal deficit is a real challenge both for the central and state governments. That's where I think more of corporate social responsibility initiatives have to be taken to the next level, where employment generation and entrepreneurial kind of avenues should be explored more. But just now we have to concentrate more on expanding the safety nets and social protection.
Yes. So I think because there are very nice questions that have been posted, but we have a shortage of time. So I'm taking one last question, which is addressed to both of you. This is again, the person's name is some Galaxy, something as a name. His question is like this, his or her question is like this. My question to both resource person, why the hindrance in helping people in difficulty in COVID situation by the social workers or departments in Karnataka particular and in India generally? I mean, I am just interpreting the question. I think the person is asking what is the hindering factor to actually reach out to people and help, both for the social workers as well as the various governmental departments, is what I understood. Uh, so,
I think, of course, because of the pandemics, like even our social work students who are having jobs, in different settings, could not get to their workplace. So even if they want to help, some are working in school, some are working as a addiction counselor, school counseling, all different settings. Everything is closed. So I think the main thing is because of the lockdown. And then when it starts to opening up gradually, a new way of help has to be there because of all this social distancing. And I think agencies are also preparing workers to get back, social work students or social work practitioners to get back to their workplace, but with different, they need to put some facilities in place. Yeah, even our university, I'm seeing workers, this whole week putting glasses, taking out chairs and try to keep the distance apart. So all these things have been going on, in our area. Yeah. And in the meantime, I would say if there is a possibility to reach out to the people that you're helping, using the social media platform, that would be the best way. Or if they can maintain the distance and make sure that they cover, that will be the best way. If you have to see the clients face to face this way, in order to protect both parties.
Yeah, so one is, I think I would agree that one was the health concern and as well as the governmental norms, adherence to governmental norms. Secondly, I think government also had certain kind of restrictions that only registered organizations were allowed, and certain protocols had to be followed. And but mainly, I think it was also a structural, our own practitioner kind of drawback that we already had in our education system, that most of us, for example, when it comes to the social work educators, we did not look at ourselves as practitioners. We thought it is our work only to train students and to teach, and it is the practitioners rather than fieldwork settings. We never thought of direct practice or direct engagement. So that's a lack of some kind of earlier preparedness made us homebound or inbound. And I think based on this experience, we should, I think one is at least now we should think of collaborating better with the other civil society or actors. And when it comes to future, I think this experience should help us to be better prepared to kind of directly plunge into action and join hands with the governmental and non-governmental kind of organizations in reaching out, so that social work or workers are also recognized as very important kind of contributors to once again putting the lives and livelihoods back on the track. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. So I think we will have to conclude the session right now. We are already.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks for that wonderful sessions today. I think in this evening, that too dinner time, thanks for patient listening and bearing with us. I would like to take this opportunity to thank both the speakers for enlightening the current issue. First of all, I would like to thank Ashok sir for giving us the time for our webinar. Thank you. I extend hearty thanks to you, sir. And I also would like to extend my gratitude to Caroline ma'am for joining from overseas. Great thank you, ma'am, on behalf of our college. And I would also like to thank Shankar sir for introducing the both speakers to this session. And I would like to thank Siddhappa sir and Nandini ma'am for coordinating from different places. And I would also like to thank all the delegates, participants, students, research scholars, teachers, and various other professionals for joining with us. And I hope this gave you a wonderful insight into what's unorganized, which is need of the hour. So we will meet you tomorrow session. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.